Hey, it's Randy from UC Status. Today I'm going to show you something from our friends at Yealink. It's the A30. It's a new Collab Bar or Microsoft Teams room on Android, and it's the big brother of the A20, which I showed you in another video. So right off the bat, you might note that this is a little bit bigger than the A20, and that's for good reason. The eagle-eyed among you will have noticed there are not one, but two cameras on this. The first camera is here. It's a fixed camera. And what this camera is used for is to help this second camera. The second camera has an electronic PTZ. This is actually a rubberized front which will allow the camera to move freely about. But this camera actually shoots the entire room, and then it helps this one with its framing mechanism. You can just use this as a stationary camera just to shoot the image that you want, but it will also do auto framing, so group framing. So a person comes in, it will zoom in on them to get the best shot possible. Another person comes in alongside them, it will zoom out and actually frame both people. And as more people are added to the room, the shot gets wider, it will optimize itself and find the best shot possible. But it will also do speaker tracking. And while it's hard to demonstrate on my own in a small space like this, it will zoom in on each speaker in turn as they carry on the conversation. So the characteristics, you'll note it's fairly long. Unlike the A20, it doesn't carry that cloth front, but it's more of a kind of a metal mesh. Again, the dual cameras have that electronic shutter, automatically closing when they're not in use. Of course, here you got the Yealink logo, and next to it you've got an infrared sensor. It will work with the same remote control that works on all the cameras from Yealink and the other Collab bars, but it also has a new party piece, which I'll show you in a second. Right, so if I twist this around carefully without trying to jar that PTZ camera too much, and show you around the back. So here, you've got all the ports that live along this space here. So I'm just going to get a better grip on this. So you've got DC power. It doesn't run on PoE like the baby brother, the VC210. It will run on DC mains. Next to that, you've got what's called the VCH port. And this is common throughout the Yealink range. And it's actually a Cat5 or Cat6 cable that will run data, screen sharing, and a bunch of other stuff besides. And this VCH port will enable a new feature that will be exclusive to Yealink, at least for a short time, and that is wired content ingest in Teams meetings through the Collab Bar. Next to that, you've got a line in and line out for audio, so if you wanted to plug in an external speaker or another microphone or something, you can do that there. Next to that, you've got dual HDMI, so this is capable of dual screen, just like the A20. And then, of course, you've got the Ethernet port there. It will run on Wi-Fi, but for the best experience possible, I would recommend doing wired internet. And then, of course, you've got cable lock. And down the side here, you've got two USB-A ports. And those can be used for things like, maybe a keyboard with a trackpad, or a dongle for a wireless keyboard and mouse. Or, for instance, maybe if you've got a touchscreen in-room display, you'll need USB to actually take those inputs from the screen itself and transfer those into the actual Teams meeting. So I'm just going to put this down for a sec, and I'm going to show you the other accessory. So what we've got here is what's called the CTP-A18. The CTP-A18 is the in-room touch console that goes on the table. So you'll note that this looks very similar to the M-Touch, which comes with the Microsoft Teams rooms on Windows. It's a similar screen. It doesn't have motion sensor like the other one does, but it's very, very similar nonetheless. This runs on PoE only, no external DC power supply. And if I scooch it around the back, you've got this, sort of swivel thing to adjust your angle on the table itself. You've got an Ethernet port there, which takes the network connection, obviously connects it to the internet itself. And then here you've got a USB-C port, which is only used for maintenance and maybe for upgrading it or something like that. So once you've plugged in the Ethernet port here, you chase the cable out through this little slot here. Then you put this cover on to hide everything away. A couple of screws at the top, and actually makes it nice and secure. So why don't we plug in the A30 and the CTP-A18, and I'll show you this thing in action. Right, so now that we've got the A30 plugged in, I'll show you around the experience. So you'll also note we've got a new user interface for the in-room display. So it's very different to the old experience. This update only came out a couple of weeks ago. It's very simplistic in its design. You've got a calendar box here. This will actually show you all the meetings that are upcoming. There's no meetings today, and that will tell you that there. And down the left of the calendar bar, you've also got the controls. So you've got Meet Now, Dial Pad, and then you've got a More button. And if you're using a touchscreen, which this is not, or you're using the remote itself, you can navigate around quite simply by using the D-pad to navigate up and down. So if we wanted to start a new meet now, we just hit meet now, and you've got a keyboard, and you can just type whatever you want. It's very clunky on the remote. I wouldn't recommend using the remote very much. So if you're going to use the solution just like this, I would recommend plugging in a keyboard and mouse or using a touchscreen, but there's actually one better, and that's this down here, and I'll show you that in a second. And of course you got the dial pad there, and you only get that dial pad if you've got a voice routing policy and a phone system license. And of course you got the more there, which gets you at device settings and so forth and so on. So I'm just going to pop a meeting in the calendar. Right, so as you can see, I've popped a meeting in the diary, so you can see it here in the calendar box. Of course, we've still got the controls there. If you got a mouse and keyboard or just use a remote, you can press join and you're in. But I've also done something to the CTP-A18. So it's powered by PoE, as I said before. I've already gone and signed it in as the same account as the room. So in my case, it's Tatooine. You can see it's signed in there as Tatooine. So what happens is when it signs in, it does a broadcast on the network to try and find a Collab bar that it can actually pair with. So when it finds one in the directory. You can see it says select a device to start pairing. And then below that is a button that says Yealink MeetingBar A30. And then it has the serial number below that. And if it hasn't found the device you want, you've got a search again button. So I know this is the only A30 I've got on the network, so I'm just going to press pair. So what it does is it displays this number on the screen itself and allows you to use this as a pairing code. So 322832, and then I'm going to press pair. So it says setting up your device, and now all set, pairing successful. And that's it, you're in. So one thing you'll note right off the bat is the meeting controls, or the controls here, have disappeared from the actual in-room display. They've actually reappeared down here on the CTP-A18. You got the Meet Now button, the dial pad, the More button. So if I press More, you can actually get at the Meet Now dial pad feedback, and of course the settings, the volume and mute for the actual speakers. And if I just go back, of course you've got the calendar bar on the left-hand side here, and a join button. So this is very similar to the Microsoft Teams rooms on Windows. If you can use a Teams rooms on Windows, touchscreen display on the table, you can use the touch console with a Collab bar. It's exactly the same. Now if I just want to press join, see it says connecting. You got the hang up button and the mute there, and we're in. Now you can see what I'm seeing. You'll note that the actual eyelids have opened on both cameras themselves, and you can see what's going on. So when you're in a meeting, you've got the U bar down the bottom, you've got the volume down and up, you've got the mute for the speakers themselves. You can turn the camera off and on, mute the microphones, and hang up. You've also got a More button here, brings up another menu. I've got the dial pad, so if I need to press a code to actually get into an audio conference, I can turn off incoming video, I can raise my hand in a meeting, turn on live captions, share a whiteboard, and start recording. One thing to note is to share a whiteboard, the actual device itself needs to be in what's called personal mode. You're in personal mode if you sign into the device with a user account with a user-based license, so E1, E3, E5, that kind of thing. If you sign into the account with a meeting room license, meeting room standard or meeting room premium, that will put the device into what's called meeting mode, and you won't get the share whiteboard, at least not right now. Right, so one thing I'm going to do just before I exit the meeting is I'm going to turn off the camera. And you'll note that the little eyelids actually close automatically. So when the cameras are not in use, they'll shut the actual eyes on them automatically to tell you that you're definitely not being watched when you're in that meeting. Right, I'm just going to come out of here. Now for some stats about the A30. So let's start with the audio. It's got dual 5-watt speakers, definitely enough oomph to fill a room, and it's got 8 MEMS beamforming microphone array. Just to give you some idea of how good the microphone array is, I used this device in my lounge on Easter Sunday to have a Teams call with my family. I was sitting about 20 feet away and whispering into the device, and it was picking up everything I was saying. I also enabled live captions into the meeting, and it could actually transcribe everything I was saying even though I was whispering, and quite far away. To give it a further test, I also walked out of the room about another 15 feet away and it could still pick me up clearly. So the microphones are definitely able to scale to pretty much any size room. And if that's not good enough, Yealink is going to be adding the ability to actually expand the microphone array. You'll be able to have wired or wireless tabletop microphones or one or more ceiling microphones to be able to extend the audio for most room sizes. So now let's talk about the cameras. We got dual cameras, of course, and they're 8 megapixels, which means they're 4K capable. Right now in Teams meetings on the Collab Bar, they're capable of 720p. That will soon be upgraded to 1080p in a future update. Right, the cameras themselves. You got a wide camera. So the wide camera has got a 120 degree field of view. So as I said, the wide camera, its only purpose is to shoot the room itself. It will film the entire room with that wide field of view and pick up everybody in that room. And then it'll help the secondary camera or telephoto camera to be able to use its tracking features more successfully. The telephoto camera has got a 90 degree field of view, which is still fairly wide, but it doesn't need to be quite as wide because it's also got electronic PTZ. It's got plus or minus 25 degrees on the horizontal axis and plus or minus 16 degrees at the vertical axis. So quite a lot of movement to go around the room and do what it needs to do. So as I said, you can use the telephoto camera as a static image. So you can just find the optimal image in the settings and film the room itself, zoom in on the table to where all your participants are always going to be, and leave it at that. But you can also enable tracking modes. So the first is called group framing. So group framing means that it will always try and find that optimum shot depending on how many people are in the room. So if you've got one person in the room, it will zoom in on them wherever they are in the room and fill the whole image with just that one person. If a second person comes in, sits on the opposite side of the table, it will zoom out and frame both people. If a third person comes in, it will try and compensate, zoom out, zoom in as it needs to try and find the optimal shot. The second mode you've got is called speaker track. It will use the microphones and the wide camera itself to try and find the speakers in the room and actually zoom in on each one in turn as they speak. Now the speaker tracking is actually quite good, but in my opinion, I think the group framing is probably where you want to be. Once it finds where it needs to be in the room itself, it just stays there. It's not very noisy. It doesn't really move around a lot. It doesn't fidget like some cameras I've seen do. It will just find that optimal shot and stay there until it needs to adjust. So what else can the A30 do? So right now you can join an existing scheduled Teams meeting, or you can start a new meeting just by doing a meet now. Of course, you got that dial pad for phoning a number if you want to, but there's a new feature that's coming very shortly, thanks to a new box from Yealink called the VCH51. So the VCH51 will actually plug into the VCH port, that little Cat5 port on the back, and that will enable wired content ingest into Teams meetings. It will also enable what's called BYOD mode. In BYOD mode, you'll be able to just plug in your laptop, join a Zoom meeting or a WebEx meeting, and use the actual audio and video and the screen to actually join that meeting in that room. I believe Yealink is also working on a way to be able to switch between Teams mode and BYOD mode on the touch console. I haven't seen that myself, but it's going to add some versatility to the whole experience itself. The VCH51 will be available separately to purchase from your AV vendor or your distributor, and the switching experience will probably come in a future update. So another feature that's going to come with a future update is, in my opinion, even more exciting than doing wired content ingest in BYOD mode. It is the ability to do wireless content ingest. Anybody that knows Yealink Microsoft Teams rooms will know this is called the WPP20. It's a wireless sharing dongle that pairs with the M-Touch for the Generation 2 devices, the M-Share for the Generation 1 devices, and soon it will pair with the Collab Bars from Yealink. I believe it will pair with the A20 and the A30, and it will enable wireless content ingest just using this dongle on a PC or Mac. Simply plug in the dongle, press the button, and share your whole screen into the Teams meeting, or actually just into the Collab Bar in the room itself. So in terms of management for the A30, it's like any other Yealink device. You can get at the settings from more and settings there. You've also got a web UI. All you need to do is browse to the IP address and sign in with the credentials. And you can get at all manner of settings, including fine-tuning the camera settings, things like the white balance and the noise and the ratio. You can also set which mode you want, whether it's speaker, tracking, group framing, and if you're using a static mode for the camera, you can go ahead and adjust that framing to find the optimal space in that room to actually shoot. You can get at advanced network settings and a lot more besides. Of course, both the A30 and the CTP-18 are signed into Teams using a standard user account, which means they'll both appear in the Teams Admin Center. They actually appear as separate devices. They actually appear in the Teams Admin Center as separate devices. You have to go into the A30 to actually see the touch console that's signed in with the same account. There's only a limited number of settings you can change in the Teams Admin Center for the Collab bars. You can also get at the logs, you can reboot the device, and you've got the configuration profile for some very basic settings like time zone, setting the default password, and that sort of thing. And like every Yealink device, you can also manage the Collab bars on their cloud management service, or YMCS for short. I'll show you that in another video, so be sure to stay tuned. So Teams rooms on Android are definitely catching up with their Teams rooms on Windows counterparts. You got the tabletop touchscreen console with all of the controls, whether you just use the Meet Now or the dial pad, or hit the one-touch join. And of course you've got that U-bar when you're in a meeting to control everything from audio and video to starting recording or a whiteboard. It's definitely a great alternative to the Windows experience if you want more of an appliance approach to your Teams rooms, and the cameras and the microphones will scale up to the size of the room. You definitely want to consider the A30 as one of the standard options for your room estate. Alright, and that's it for now. Go ahead and like and subscribe if this has been useful. Share with your friends if it might be useful to them. And I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.